Hey everyone, this is GosuDad, and welcome to the final days of Season 6 of the Blizzard Online Ladder. This is Game 4, CuePhoenix vs. Gryphian, Terran vs. Protoss on the map Metalopolis. Hey everyone, this is GosuDad, and welcome to the 4-player map Metalopolis, a map I know and love. It just brings me fond memories of those early days of the Blizzard Online Ladder, playing in this 4-player map, myself, CuePhoenix, playing Terran in the red on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, Gryphian playing Protoss in the blue. Another awesome thing, we're getting to see Protoss after seeing so many Terran versus Terran games, Terran versus Zerg games. We're now getting to see some Protoss. It's going to be so exciting. I am so excited. Such a fun map to play on, especially with this particular matchup. Nice natural expansion, very close to your main, but very exposed. You can see a lot of open ground on this natural expansion, a lot of avenues for attack, not just from the back, but also from this location down here, and then a very exposed third expansion, 2 massive entrance ramps to that third, and of course the infamous gold expansion over here in the middle of the map for both players, right next to these 2 Xel'Naga towers. Just classic map. So here we are, Terran versus Protoss. So it'll be kind of interesting looking at this from a review standpoint, looking for little holes and little nuggets of information as a Zerg player in the current season. Scouting drone, scouting SCV coming out for CuePhoenix. Going to be scouting that close by air position before I scout the close by ground position, and as you can see, Gryphian already mining some minerals from his close by air position as well. Now that's an important thing to keep in mind here, is you got to check out all those different positions, especially in a 4-player map, especially in maps where all the positions are not equal as far as are they close by ground, close by air, etc. The most important thing, of course, is knowing whether your opponent is close to you or far from you, and Gryphian's sending out 2 different scouting probes for that purpose. Not sure why I'm following this probe, but he's not going to go anywhere. Okay, 2 players keeping up on their supply counts. Let's check out to see what CuePhoenix sees as he comes into this base. So a very important thing as we pop on the vision for CuePhoenix is when you're scouting, you should have an idea of what to do with that scouting information. So if I come in so early that I just see a pylon and a gateway, that doesn't tell me, unless I'm going to do something based on that information, there's no point in me sending an SCV in the first place, except to perhaps get inside the base so I can look around here and I can see that there's a second gateway going down. I see there's 1 gas. So as a Bronze Silver League player, if seeing 2 gateways and 1 gas does not tell you anything, then there's no point in you having your worker in there except to distract yourself and increase your APM and distract yourself from keeping up on the macro inside of your base. Now, Gryphian did send out this this Zealot, which I think he's going to use to just try to capture that SCV on his rounds, because at this point Gryphian doesn't really want to reveal what he's doing with his build. Building a couple of Zealots there. I don't think he even chrono boosted those out, so going for a Cybernetics core finally. So I guess it does kind of key me off a little bit. If he's going for that Cybernetics core second, he won't be going for super early 4-gate pressure, and this SCV just being allowed to live and walk around the base and look for those timings. And of course down in Silver Bronze League, knowing those timings may not mean anything to me, especially if I get my SCV killed. So pylon up at the front, there's no wall up at the front, so that perhaps gives me a glimmer of hope of being able to march up this ramp. But then again, you know, these are those classic maps from the very beginning of the online ladder, where those entrance ramps were so terribly small, incredibly hard to get up these entrance ramps, especially with units on high ground on the left and the right being able to come in and counter. Now, of course, that same thing exists for myself back here in Team Terran, as we're able to see a nice little symmetrical wall off and just a few units being built, and that is why, of course, the army counts are so different between us. Okay, the army counts as in army supply, not very different, but of course Gryphian being able to chrono boost out probes, which you saw that a little bit earlier, an advantage of the Protoss player being able to focus production essentially on probes instead of tech or army. So the Terran builds are very... That's one of the things I've noticed about Terran is like the very standard race. You know, you've got these units they build at a certain particular time. There's nothing to speed them up. The only thing you can do to increase your production is to build more buildings. There are some little things like these reactors and stuff that can change those timings a little bit, but it all comes down to the number of buildings that you have. Not so for the Zerg. Of course, you have that larva capability, and the Protoss, who, depending on where they put that chrono boost, they can either be focusing on building probes or focusing on building army units, or even focusing on researching tech, which you can see him researching this warp gate, but he doesn't have that. He's not pushing on that very quickly. Now, these units down here, I'm not sure if he's trying to protect himself from some kind of early bunker attack, or me putting something down here to prevent him from expanding. But the Protoss player is at an advantage. I think in this case, the Protoss player is the Turtling player. So the onus is on the Terran player to expand faster, to build more units, since their units are weaker than the Protoss units, and to put pressure on, and to be watching out for when the Protoss expands. I don't believe that I have any vision as we pop on the V using the vision key. I have no idea that he's expanded. I mean, all I've seen is this pylon over here being built, so I have no idea what's coming. Now, of course, he's already starting to do the beginnings of a 4-gate, sending these stalkers over here, which can't do anything, so I'm going to get some free shots here from the high ground. Very good move on my part, and very bad move on his part, but he's able to move those units away, and that's no problem. I think most of them, as I hit the Alt tab, most of them just took shield damage, so that's no problem there. So another thing that the differences between Protoss and Terran, of course, that the Protoss units can heal their shields, essentially recharge those shields. Zerg units can heal, and of course Marines, all those biological units can be healed, mechanical units can be repaired, healed by medevacs, repaired by SCVs. So everybody's got a little bit of that regenerative capability, but Protoss and Zerg, of course, accentuated that because they don't need additional units to do that. Now, that there is a price for them, their units are very expensive, and these Marauders, if I see Marauders, oh no, they're somewhere else, they're going somewhere else. Marauders and Marines going the wrong direction to hold off this attack. They could make quick work of these Stalkers, and just a few Zealots. Zealots are very strong against those early game units. And the Stalkers are pretty good as well, but those Zealots are just really strong. Once they get into contact here, you can see this Marauder just getting sliced to bits by this Zealot who's ignoring him, so he's not being sliced to bits. Instead, this Marauder being able to stay alive for quite some time. Oh, until he realized what's going on. Now, I did bring up these attacking units to blow up that pylon, so these units are trapped, and he's making them come back home, which is a very good idea, very safe idea. Now, I'm going to hope to get in here. I do have Stim going down now. We'll be able to see how quickly this Marine Marauder ball is able to take out those Protoss units. He's trying to do a little bit of kiting, but that's just not going to work with stimmed units, and there's just so much damage output, and at this point he's just stalling these units from coming in to attack his rather exposed natural. Checking out the Army Supply tab, he's only got 6 supply in Army units. Those are these 3 Stalkers, which I'm guessing he warped those in pretty quickly. Thank you very much. I was about to comment on that gateway not being a warp gate, but he is taking care of that, placing down a robotics facility and a pylon. Interesting place for a robotics facility. I think I would have put that somewhere else, but doesn't matter if I'm not putting pressure on it as the Terran player. Doesn't matter. So Gryphian up on 2 bases now, an economic advantage at that point, and me finally just plopping down that orbital command. So I think we're pretty close here. Let's take a look at that income to see what the comparison is, and Gryphian with a lot more income than me and a lot more workers. Yes, up on that worker supply. So that little attack by Gryphian puts pressure on the Terran player, forces me to multitask, forces me to not build as much stuff, although it looks like I have caught up on using up my minerals, but I have a lot of gas banked up, which is doing me absolutely no good back at Team Terran. Now researching that combat shield. Should have researched that first, and it looks like I'm trying to build an engineering bay, which I should have done much earlier. But such is the life down in Bronze Silver League. Lots of barracks coming up, no factory, no starport, just lots of barracks. Okay, so really relying on that Marine Marauder ball, but at this point I'm behind in economy, so I'm playing catch-up to a Protoss player, which is a terrible thing, a terrible place to be in, and that's something to remember, especially so when I'm playing Zerg, that the Protoss, I kind of believe I kind of consider the Protoss as being the main turtling race, and so the other two have to play, have to build more units or have to macro harder than the Protoss player. So if the Protoss is on 2 base, Terran needs to build a 3rd. Protoss is on 2 base, Zerg needs to build what, maybe a 3rd or a 4th? I don't know. I haven't played a lot of Zerg versus Protoss games. I've heard they're very challenging down at this lower level, where you don't have the ability to make use of a lot of those spells and micro-intensive strategies. So Protoss player sitting back on his base and building just a few things, cannon and an immortal, and of course the Terran player building like crazy, trying to build as many units as I can, reactors on barracks, just trying to build tons of stuff, concerned that I am behind in the arms race. researching that armor upgrade. Super important. Should be plopping down a second engineering bay to research multiple upgrades at the same time. Protoss player not researching any armor upgrades. He doesn't have any armor or weapon upgrades whatsoever. So if I am able to, as a Terran player, build or get an advantage in the upgrade area, I will be at an advantage. And similar to how the upgrades are vitally important to Zerg players all the time, because they have so many units, and those upgrades, the impact of those upgrades is enhanced by the number of units that you have. In this case, since I'm going for a mass Marine Marauder ball, mass Marine Marauder defense, it's against a Protoss player. Those upgrades are vitally important for me, maybe even more important than for the Protoss player. Now, third expansion going down, so kind of taking the role of the more aggressive, macroing, more mobile player in this matchup, Terran versus Protoss. I believe the Protoss kind of being more stationary at this point, and he isn't going for the Colossus, going for the Immortals, which are very good. Very, very good against Marauders and a lot of these Zealots. Now, I wonder if he's going to be researching Charge. Charged Zealots are just terrible, and especially down here in the lower leagues. Charged Zealots are just terrible when I'm playing against them as a Terran player, because the charge ability is not something that you have to micro, which means that a lower league player, once they research Charge, it just kind of, takes effect immediately. And Charge, basically, Charge helps the Zealots close the distance to their opponents because they're melee units, right? They have this melee disadvantage. Marines can kite Zealots, etc., especially with that concussive shell. Terran units can easily kite Zealots. But with Charge, now the Zealots come right into contact with those Terran units and are able to just do a terrible amount of damage. I think, in some sense, they're more damaging to those Terran units, especially if the Terran isn't doing a lot of kiting, more damage than Stalkers and whatnot. So, Zealots, super powerful. But that being said, if there's a ton of guys that you're fighting, that advantage is mitigated. Do I see some upgrades finally coming out for the Protoss player? Looks like he is researching Weapons 1 and not putting down another Forge. So we're on Terran 3 base to Protoss 1 base. Let's check out that Army Supply tab, 102 to 83. So looks like we are even. Now that may sound odd for me to say even when Terran player has more supply, but just like in any Zerg matchup where the Zerg player is going to want more army units than their opponent, the same thing happens in these matchups against Protoss. Their opponents, whether it's Terran or Zerg, will want to have more units in that supply count than their opponent. Now in my case, I have a lot of units, and I was bringing these units up here to check out a third, but surprise, surprise, I'm going to catch him in a high ground situation. This is really bad for those Protoss units. Now, of course, he did have this observer up here, which negated the high ground advantage, but oh, he's just running around, and that was a bad decision from him to run over there left and then turn around running back. Those Immortals are going to get cut off, and they are so expensive to build. And these Marines and Marauders just trying to catch up and get some free kills off. I don't think Concussive Shell was researched. That's why these Immortals are able to get away and counterattacked by the charging Zealots. And just like I said, see how powerful those Zealots are now. But again, just look at that. Look at that. The Stalkers and the Immortals barely had time to come in there. Those Zealots took all those units out. Now, of course, some of that, I think there was a benefit there that my units had been stemmed recently, several times actually, and so those units were damaged coming into that fight. But man, just look at those Zealots. They're just able to do a terrible amount of damage, trying to pan very gracefully here, but not doing a very good job of that. So again, we see here the danger of waiting too long against a Protoss player is that they're able to research some of those techs. And Charge is not that high up the tech tree for the Protoss player to research, and I just think it's just such a valuable thing, a very powerful thing to do. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to recover from this. I kind of want to say I didn't, but if we look, I'm a terrible caster. We can see I had a second group that was coming down and hitting his natural at exactly the same time. So at this point, it is possibly a base race situation. It looks like I'm ahead on the supply count. If he decides not to stay, oh, that is a huge thing in my favor. Because he decided not to stay, I was able to take out his natural, shut down this Twilight Council. Not sure if it was going to research anything important, but most importantly, because I've essentially kited his army all the way back to his base. Oh, and some of that is I'm scouting out his third. I'm going to be able to destroy that before he gets there in time. Honestly, I think he would have been better off to go into the main and try to come in here, but, I was building units at the same time, and I was on third bases. Well, actually, this third base isn't doing anything, so that's not much advantage, but that was enough that'll be enough here, because now we're back to one base Protoss, and I think back at his main he's got no minerals. So he is back to a really weird, awkward stance where he has basically no income. My units are on the run, but the more that I kite him around the map, the more that he moves around that map, that less mobile force of the Protoss is at a disadvantage, and now we are at a spot where I have a ton, well, okay, I was about to say a ton of army supply. We're pretty much on par supply-wise, but I think I've got him on the run and a little nervous. I think these Stalkers are very weak against that Marine Marauder ball that's been coming. Have not seen any medevacs that would really push things in the Terran player's favor. But don't forget this sensor tower right here, giving me a ton of vision over what's going on the map. And in a map like Metalopolis, 4-player map, all your traffic is going up and down these kind of major highways. Knowing where the armies are is huge, especially when you're playing against Protoss. We're going to pop up the hit points because we like to see those colors advancing. Well, it does make it kind of hard to see, but just look at that. I mean, a lot of these units are in the back. They're not doing anything. They're getting stimmed, which is essentially the same as getting damaged. But yeah, well, and they're going to take that little guy out. Here he goes. Oh, you could make it. Maybe not. Concussive shell still not researched. Able to make it a long ways. But looking at these two players, you know, a lot of banked minerals on my side. Gryphian does have some banked minerals, but just not enough to build another base, and that is going to be a disadvantage for the Protoss player in this scenario. He is trying desperately to build another base. How many workers were killed there? He's down to 14 workers. Let's look at the kill tab. 29 workers. So my my attack into his natural at the same time that he brought his group into my natural, they were able to kill a lot of workers. I think all the worker kills are from that. I'm not sure how many of those worker kills were from when I went down to this third. I'm guessing not very many. So that was a huge army trade back and forth, those battles. But the result was I killed 2 expansions and he killed 1. And that is a big disadvantage for Gryphian. So trying to keep up on those expansions. And you know, this game really does kind of remind me of that Zerg matchup with anybody except another Zerg. You know, the Zerg stays back, they build a whole bunch of units, and they try to use map control, right? They try to get the Terran player or the Protoss player to move their army around the map into a disadvantageous position. I don't think that's even a word. I don't know why I keep using that word. But using their more mobile army to counterattack the opponent when their army is out of position. And if you're playing the slower race, the more mobile race, whether that's Terran or Protoss, you have to be very careful when you move that army out, and that's why that vision is so important. That's why for the Protoss player, you need to build a lot of observers and keep that vision around the map so you can know what's going on, because you do not want to be caught with your army out of position. The other option, of course, is for you to build up that death ball to some, you know, kind of critical mass point where you're just going to win with that death ball. You're going to take that death ball, sweep the map, kill every base, and win before your opponent can kill your 2 bases. And that is possible, especially if your opponent just tries to take the death ball head on, which is, you know, the definition of a death ball is a ball that's so big that, you know, it just kills everything. And that can't happen. And Gryphian say this is, you know, one of the one of the better games I've played. Big smiley face for myself. Now you notice, have I built a factory yet? I built a factory. Have I built a starport yet? I see no starport. So this was a pretty good game. I think that's kind of his indication where things are going. So Silver League, yes, I am Silver League. I can't remember what Gryphian is. But yes, it's been an interesting game with the position stuff. And still, you know, there are some things to learn as a Zerg player here, and that is keeping mobile on the map and, you know, keeping an eye on what's going around on the map. I mean, look at this. This is a very exposed expansion just waiting to get hit. And honestly, Gryphian, to a certain extent, could have brought his army over here to protect this base, because at this point this base is in some ways more important than his main base, definitely more important than his natural. I'm almost surprised he didn't build a base at his natural, which would have been more easy to defend. But big army engagement coming here, a somewhat spent Terran army. Now look at this, look how weak those Terran units are. A bunch of zealots. Whoa, look at that force field wall. Able to delay a lot of those Terran units from coming into the fight, but that's just not going to be enough. Now, had those force fields been used with a ton of zealots, that would have been an amazing encounter, but of course, Gryphian with those, you know, just a poor timing on those trades, lost the natural, lost his third, which were his main mining bases, and that put us kind of in the situation that we're in now. Now if you look at how much minerals I had, some of that was my main mining base over at that third was left intact, and I was able to quickly replace that natural expansion as well. So GG from Gryphian, and should be heading over into that post game. Tongue sticking out, but there you go. Wow, so quite a game there. Not sure what the tongue sticking out there was for the end, but it's never fun to lose, especially when it's in such a dramatic fashion. This was, whoa, look at that force field wall. That is just pretty to look at on these ultimate settings here. But yeah, so again, I think a very just kind of basic game, laying out the differences between these two races, and again at a very kind of Bronze League, Silver League level. You got the Protoss player that's less mobile, his army's slower but more powerful, and the Terran player or the Zerg player trying to out macro him, and that makes the game very kind of knife edge for the player that's trying to macro more, the Terran or the Zerg. But yet again, I admit I played a little bit of Protoss, and it can be very nervous as well, not knowing when to move out that death ball. So GosuDad signing off, and we'll be taking a break from this game. And check out the blog, gosudad.blogspot.com, as well as my Twitter at GosuDad. Okay, we'll see you again later. See you, bye. This is Game 4, CuePhoenix versus Gryphian, Terran versus Protoss. Gryphian.